Hey everyone, trigger warning on this episode. There will be some sexual assault content.
So, traditional Jewish, Christian, and Muslim to understand atheist and agnostic as well as many times.
You also don't know how to start this episode, eh?
Nope, sure don't, because it's awkward. It's like that sex talk with your parents, but it's that sex talk with your friend.
That's fair.
I'm Katie.
Hi, I'm Preston.
And this is
the Holy Watermelon Podcast.
So we're kicking it up a notch. We talked about St. Valentine a couple weeks ago. Now we're talking about sex.
Yeah, we're done with the courtship and now we're into the exciting bit.
But not with each other.
Yes, important details.
We're just friends, listeners, if you've ever wondered.
Both married to other people.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of people that's not a barrier for, but
fair. It is for our monogamous Protestant relationships.
Yeah.
Oh boy. But nonetheless, we're going to have a sex talk.
Yep. A lot of religions are very strict on sexual purity. Of course, there's a spectrum. You've got some Christians who are way into free love. Don't get too close to your pastor if he is really encouraging free love.
That's a cult.
You're probably in a danger cult.
Yes, most religions think that sex should only be between a married man and his wife. Female wife.
Yeah. Wife does imply female, but
Well,
there's some ambiguity now, and that's people are going to do what they're going to do.
Oh, and people gonna fuck what they want to fuck.
Yeah. But there are rules depending on who you hang out with.
Yeah, depending on what your sky daddy says and the people that interpret that.
Yes.
Wow.
Well,
I feel like a kid again.
let's take a look at the Judaist tradition that premarital sex is really not a huge deal according to the Torah. There's no strong verbiage banning it. Obviously, it's not encouraged. That's just not something we find in scripture,
But
I
you're
guess.
not going to burn in hell forever for it.
Right. I mean, the idea of burning in hell for having sex feels fully ludicrous. But a lot of churches are happy to teach that.
Yep.
We're not there yet. We're still talking about Judaism. The more orthodox you get, the more it is discouraged. That's basically the deal.
Yeah, if you remember from our Judaism episode, very long time ago, you have your Reform, your conservative, and your Orthodox, and that would kind of be the exact scale of liberal to conservative. Say.
Pretty much. Yeah. In Exodus chapter 22, so just very shortly after the 10 Commandments block, which is, of course, more than 10 Commandments all on its own, and there's hundreds more, there's a little explanation that if a man seduces an unmarried woman, he is expected to marry her later, or at least pay her for the privilege if the father forbids the marriage, which may look a little bit like prostitution.
Yep, that's true. Especially the way you worded it, Preston. Pay for the privilege.
Yeah. Generally, this payment is expected to be the value of the dowry. And that's just the deal. They lived in a culture where very often, if a woman was not a virgin, with the new definition of virgin, then she would remain a virgin in the old definition of virgin for a very long time.
If she wasn't a virgin and a very good liar. Looking at you, Mary.
A lot of people like to find fault in the code that, through faulty interpretation, requires a woman to marry her rapist, which is, really problematic way to read that. A legal code would never reward somebody for committing such a terrible crime.
So this is like consenting teenagers that are misbehaving.
Oh, for that first part, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you seduce an unmarried woman, that's what that situation is, generally speaking. For the cases of rape that kind of fall into this category, it's taken a real loose definition of seduce, of course. The man can be required to marry the woman. Not the woman is required to marry the man. It's more or less up to her and her family. Does she have a chance of getting married after this? Then she's not going to go and marry the rapist. But if she really doesn't have great prospects, she can force him to support her financially for the rest of their lives.
I like that.
Yeah, it seems perfectly reasonable.
That should still be a thing.
But on the books, it is technically a marriage. One that can be annulled. Not really a big deal if her prospects change in the future. She doesn't have to see her rapist again, but he must continue paying to support her.
What else does the Torah say, Preston?
The Torah does explicitly demand that sexual partners both consent to the activity. Rape is one of the most serious sins. It doesn't get rewarded with, oh yeah, now you get to keep her. Nonsense.
Okay. The Torah also likes people to make babies.
This is true.
This one gets quoted a lot. Also in fundamental Christianism.
It's the first commandment. Adam and Eve are told, go and replenish the earth, which means fill it with babies.
Oh.
So
everyone's a cousin.
Sure. I've seen so many memes in the last month of people who just deliberately misunderstand the Bible. There's no way this is an accident or a failure of intelligence. They're deliberately misunderstanding it to say that Adam and Eve only had 3 sons. And so something hinky is going on there, either magical between the brothers or they're having sex with their mom. Not only is it strictly forbidden in the Bible, but it's not a major leap to just believe that they had sisters.
Or to take it what it's worth and know that it is a fictitious story. Genesis 1:28, a classic. I put in brackets. Classic. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that creepeth upon the earth.
Yeah. So the bad thing that comes out of there that later needs to be clarified expressly is that bestiality is forbidden, and this passage does not encourage it.
Oh, subdue it does not mean have sex with it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's bad. Not just because it's, an unclean thing. No, it's an abuse of an animal. And in fact, there's an awful lot of relationships that are forbidden in the Bible. Generally, they're worded as do not have sexual relationships, or slightly more euphemistically. But these also do apply to who you can marry. Every single one of these laws is addressed to men and just expected that women are going to follow pretty much the same laws. First, incest. Straight up forbidden. Good. Now that we don't need to marry brothers and sisters, because, there's more than 8 people on the planet.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea. It's been proven to be a bad idea.
In
Genetics.
most of the royal families.
Yeah. Bad times.
That's why Charles isn't a very attractive man, because his parents were cousins.
This is a, on paper, true fact. According to the Torah, your cousins are fine, even first cousins. But aunts, stepmoms, and half-sisters are off limits. This also includes your in-laws, which is actually why the whole category of in-laws exists, is because they are now legally your family.
That's what in-law means.
Yeah, but we don't treat it that way when we talk about it in regular conversation today.
Right.
It's just, this is what we call the family that we married into now, without actually considering the ramifications of it.
Of that I can never.
Way
I'm not
too
even
many.
I'm not even going to say it on air.
way too many people cheat on their significant other with their in-laws. It happens all the time. And it is really just embarrassing for the whole family.
I hate Uncle Jamie. Love Actually. Happens in Love Actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't watch it.
Jamie.
I think I saw the last 5 minutes of it once.
Sorry.
I'll probably get around to it. Maybe not. Who knows? Homosexual anal sex is, legally speaking, disgusting. That's the verbiage that's used, and that just doesn't feel like divine communication to me. That feels like somebody added their own personal commentary.
Right. I mean, when you have creepeth in a few books before, and now you're talking... creepeth. I like that a lot.
The animal that creepeth, they're actually specifically talking about reptiles.
So don't fuck a lizard?
Yeah.
Okay. Fair.
I mean, that's definitely on the list. You also don't eat lizards if you're following the Jewish dietary code.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, most of the world's not super concerned about that. Most of the world doesn't follow those dietary codes anymore.
I literally thought you were talking about sex.
Nope.
Okay.
Thanks for that. Bestiality is forbidden. Sex during menstruation is bad, technically making the man ritually unclean for 7 days. Menstruation already makes women ritually unclean for 7 days. This doesn't mean that they're sinful or like awful or bad or any moral judgment. It's just you should bathe before you go to the temple, and here's the time to make sure that you're not gross. That's basically the deal. Because some people smell bad.
I mean...
And it's very often the men.
So often the men.
That's basically the deal. So this just means that he needs to clean himself physically and wait a week before he can go to the temple. As we had talked about a few months ago in our talk about how celibacy came about in the Catholic tradition, normally he would just need to wash after sex and then wait for sunset. And then he's good to go again to the temple.
Also,
he could do whatever he wants alternatively too.
boy.
Yeah. Generally speaking, Jews are forbidden from having sex with Gentiles. Depends on who you hang out with on how strictly they follow that rule. And to be fair, that's true of all of these rules.
It's a spectrum.
Yeah. And priests are also forbidden from having sex with divorcees or converts. Yeah, I don't know why I stumbled through that word.
That's fine. I just don't. That's an interesting rule.
Yeah. The idea is that if she has a baby, is it his? If she's a new convert, then it's possible that she wasn't following all the expected rules before being joined to the priest. But for somebody who has been a divorcee or a convert for a long time, I feel like that rule is less necessary, even with this specific thought behind it. There might be more thoughts about it, who knows? And I'm sure there's different expectations among different groups there too. Not that there's a whole lot of Cohens doing their temple duty anymore anyway. But there are definitely some people who will expect their rabbis to live up to these standards as well, which makes some sense. They're not the same thing, but I get it. It's also forbidden to have sex with anybody who was born from parents while they were found to have been cheating on their partners, which is a really wordy thing.
It is. That took me a minute to wrap my head around, and also unfair for that poor child.
So, So these bastards get a pass if their partners are also bastards. Or, if one of your parents cheated on the other, and that's how you came to be, then...
You gotta find another one like you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And theoretically, your child, if born without that stigma, will be able to be free and be with whoever they want.
Okay. So just cursed for a generation.
Yeah, just the one generation.
Okay, good.
Also, we find a lot in the Bible talk of concubines. Concubine is literally somebody who lives in your house that you get to have sex with.
That you're not married to, though.
Right. That you're not married to.
I was like, I have a concubine? No.
You don't.
I have a husband.
You used to have a concubine. You no longer do. And that's all the word means. People have come up with all this kind of, well, she's tied to him in some way that's not technically a marriage. I mean, usually that's what we call slavery.
Oh.
Usually, if a man had a female slave, she would be a concubine. That's kind of the deal there.
I found a cool Jewish term called ona. Ona is a Jewish law that states a husband must satisfy his wife's sexual needs. I like that.
It's a good rule.
And this is regardless of whether or not they can or want to get pregnant. So that's pretty cool because a lot of religions say only for babies.
Yeah, that causes all kinds of problems.
Like the Duggars? I said it. Check out our bonus episode, Josh Duggar is a Creep, on Patreon.
Yes, that was some fun.
No, it wasn't.
There was some fun. It was also a lot of ick, but there was some fun.
You think this episode has a trigger warning?
Yeah. Men cannot force their wives to have sex. So it's actually a lot less of an obligation the other way around for women to satisfy all of their husband needs. There's a lot of social pressure, historically speaking, but it's not a law.
That's nice.
But we've talked about the nature of the Bible, and in our Patreon exclusive Bible study, where Katie goes through the Bible for the first time, learning all of the weird and wonderful things in there, there is porn.
I read some of it researching this, and that's my comment in the notes. I wrote nothing else is the Song of Songs is a horny old book.
Yeah. The Hebrew Bible is the collection of all of the literature that's important to the nation. It includes fiction. It includes philosophical musings.
Temple instructions.
And porn. Well, I mean, it's not really graphic porn. Even the best euphemisms for penis are really well coded so that a lot of people don't even think it means penis, which I think is just really creative poetry.
Like Jesus's turtleneck, does that come up in the Song of Songs?
It does not, but
does someone's turtleneck come up in the Song of Songs?
Come
up?
The protagonist through a big chunk of this poem is King Solomon. That doesn't mean he wrote it. It just means he's the protagonist of the story. Even though a lot of people are convinced he wrote it for some reason.
King Solomon fanfic?
Yes.
Okay.
And
like erotic fanfic.
Yeah.
I love it.
It is extremely erotic fanfic.
I just love that someone wrote erotic fanfic 2,000 years ago.
In poetic form.
Man. It's a Tina Belcher move.
Yeah. But it was so well written, according to the people who decided that it got to be in the book, that it got to be in the book forever.
They cut out a lot of gospels of other people and kept a horny old poem.
Yeah, because it was so popular in the nation. Presumably at least among the upper class who got to make the decision anyway. But the best euphemism, where they talk about his big, veiny penis, they describe the blue sapphires in his loins. A lot of versions will say his thighs or whatever, but
they mean his big veiny dick.
That's a translation choice to distract from big veiny dick.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Somebody else said it, and I love the wording, and I'll repeat it forever without remembering who first said it. But while Christians like to sing about how great it's going to be dead, which has its own implications, Jewish music and poetry for thousands of years have been, man, it really rocks to be alive. And it's hard to disagree. And sometimes that celebration includes some very specific, explicit talk.
Dick references.
Yeah. Good times.
Well, let's move through the Abrahamic religions to Christianity, which is, as it always is, a mixed bag.
Yes. There's nothing you can say about Christianity that actually encompasses all of Christianity.
Even saying that Jesus is the Son of God.
Yeah.
There's a handful. Very few, but there are a few that don't think he's divine.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But
we're here to talk about sex.
So, split opinions all over the place.
Traditionally, though, most Christian leaders will tell you that sex should only happen within a marriage.
Yeah, that's pretty much the standard.
Mostly between a man and a woman, though some Christian denominations are getting more accepting.
Yeah. Diversity is interesting. 57% of American Christians are okay with premarital sex in a committed romantic relationship, according to a Pew Research Center survey, which does fall in line with the standards that we found in Judaism, where as long as you're interested in pursuing a long-term relationship, you're going to be fine.
No, I bet if you asked church leaders, you would not get a 57%
probably not
consensus on that. That's just
this is
Christians who are being bad and pretending they're not being bad.
Yeah,
I don't think it's bad. You do you, boo.
Yeah, not everybody can agree on what the rules are, so not everybody's going to follow the same rules. That's the deal. A lot of these beliefs are influenced by the Hebrew Bible, and there's not a lot written in the New Testament about sex particularly. There are talks of adulterers, like the woman caught in adultery, who Jesus was perfectly fine saying, well, unless you're actually perfect, mind your business. So that was nice.
Is that you throw the first stone?
Yeah.
That's a good line of Jesus.
The tricky bit about that particular section of scripture is that it is not found in any of the oldest versions of the Gospel of John.
I was going to say, I remember reading somewhere that I think it was the Reza Aslan book, Zealot, that even the wording of it was kind of weird. So they believe it was added after the fact, not actually
the oldest manuscripts we have don't include that story. So it's interesting that it got included when it was a time when people were very happy to say you're the wrong kind of Christian, go away. It's just interesting bit of history.
It's a good story.
It's a positive thing to include in the story that, the whole deal of Jesus is that we forgive people and we can be better. So it fits the narrative really well. And we also have another part of the story where he says, if you're going to lust after somebody, you've already had sex with them in your heart.
This will cause problems in some fundamental Christian groups later, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Women, cover up now. I'm kidding.
Get that thought out of here.
No, I mean, cover up your bodies because men are visual creatures. I don't know what that makes women, but men are visual creatures. So, anyway.
It's weird that so much of our culture includes this story that men and women are coded so completely differently.
I mean, I read a lot in this research and I didn't put anything in it, but talking about different levels of sexual desire. I'm like, are we still talking about that? Because Turning Red talked about how horny teen girls are, and I loved it.
I never watched it, but I'm glad somebody addressed it.
Yeah.
Because I was a teen at the time that this film is set. I am aware of that much.
I know, that's why I loved it. I was like, this is about me.
But
Only 10 years ago.
It's not about me, so it's not drawing me in with the same power, I guess.
Fair. But it talked about how horny preteen girls are, and I was like, yes, accurate.
Which, I mean, you're not selling me on it that I need to watch it. That it doesn't feel like it's for me or about me.
It's heartwarming.
Okay.
They just lust after a boy band, which we all did.
I mean, not me, but
okay.
Not all men, Katie.
Okay. Anyway, as I was saying, we're not coded that differently. Women have eyes.
Yep.
And looking at Henry Cavill.
Of course.
If you're listening, please be on the podcast.
speaking of how we are coded not terribly differently, there's this idea that's called Marianismo, which is basically just the alternative, the exact opposite of machismo, which I thought was really interesting.
I've never heard the term before.
Yeah, it doesn't come up terribly often in regular conversation. It is the ideal feminine. In their book, The Maria Paradox, therapists Gill and Vasquez recorded the beliefs they found among many of their patients that they claim are the core of Marianismo.
Oh, no.
And they are all just awful. I mean, differing degrees, but they're not good news. The first, don't forget the place of a woman. What's
Where
that?
is that? Okay, where
the
is
kitchen?
That? Get out of my house.
The bedroom?
Well, you know I can't cook as good as my husband.
The home broadly? I don't know. So, tricky business.
In the workplace.
You got to establish what you mean.
Wherever the fuck they want to be.
Right? That's the real truth of it. But these ideas persist. Next on our list, don't give up your traditions. Okay. I can... how about thoughtfully evaluate your traditions? Not everything needs to be kept going. Like if you're cutting the tips off your roasts before you throw them in the oven just because you watch your mom and your grandma do it, there might not be a reason. If the whole thing fits in the roaster, throw the whole thing in without cutting it.
Preston likes his roast tips.
Why not?
I don't know.
Next, don't be an old maid, independent, or have your own opinions. Don't do it, Katie. It's not worth it.
I want to say something, but that's an opinion.
Yeah. Why is that a healthy way to live your life?
Well, that's good that you want an independent wife with her own opinions.
I think it's really, really useful.
Good.
Next on your list, don't put your needs first. I mean, I understand the social utility of taking care of the people around you, but sometimes you got to take care of you.
There's a reason that the airplanes say you put on your mask first before your kids.
Yes.
Always put your needs first. I mean, within reason. If you're not picking your kids up from school because you're at the spa, maybe you need to reevaluate. But put on your airplane mask first.
Yeah.
Oxygen mask.
I was just thinking of way worse examples than the spa to keep you from picking up your kids. They don't need to be aired publicly.
Join us on Discord to see how perverse Preston is.
I was just thinking of drugs, not anything terribly perverted. Just, crack. I don't know why that's the thing my brain jumped to from spa, but here we are.
Don't wish to be anything but a housewife.
Great.
I mean, to be fair, I did ask Brian if I could be a housewife today because I was really sick of work, but
you also have other aspirations.
I do.
And they don't make you less of a good person. They don't make you less of a woman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, ladies, don't forget, sex is to make babies, not pleasure.
Yeah, that's a problem. We've already addressed that.
I was scrolling Instagram Reels because, as one does, and I came across this comedian who was clearly like a doctor or a gynecologist or a former one. And this pregnant lady came in and she was freaking out and she didn't know what was wrong with her. And she had an orgasm, her first orgasm, and she was pregnant and she didn't know what was wrong with her. Isn't that the most depressing thing
It is depressing.
Ever heard?
I mean, it's a little funny, but it is depressing.
And they make a baby. I mean,
I think you know.
I do.
At this point, I think you know.
So sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some people become horse girls. Other people go a long time without ever knowing. Oh, well.
Moment of silence, please. I said silence. Carrying on. Don't be unhappy with your man, no matter what he does to you, ladies.
Yeah, this is
Marriage 101.
extremely problematic.
Incredibly problematic.
Oh, well.
I wonder why rates of abuse are so high in some of these fundamentalist communities.
Mm-hmm. Don't ask anyone other than your husband for help under any circumstances. Because, of course, really what's behind that is you're not allowed to talk to other men, which is a huge problem.
So for our listeners, my husband works out of town, like, quite frequently. And if I did have Preston and a whole sleuth of other men, that sounds terrible, nothing would get done around this house. The number of times Preston has moved heavy shit for me, A++, Fred.
Thanks. Yeah, it's okay to talk to people of the opposite gender or whatever. You don't have to be isolated to a tiny group of the population around you. You can spread that out a little bit more.
Don't discuss your personal problems outside the house. Don't get therapy or call the police.
Right? What could go wrong? There's a degree to which I agree with this, but there comes a time when you need to seek outside help. And the last on the list, don't change.
Very vague and also impossible.
Right? Like, yeah, I get it. A lot of people end up disappointed when the person they married changes in the wrong way that they weren't expecting. And then, you're not the one I married. Sure. You can't expect people to not change, though.
She will get haggard and old. That is guaranteed.
Right.
Especially if you treat her according to this list.
Yeah.
She'll stay younger longer if you give her orgasms. Facts.
Sounds good to me.
Facts.
And that's Marianismo, the opposite of machismo that needs no explanation at all.
So now we're going to talk about Christian purity culture. I think we can do a whole episode on this. There's a lot I left out.
I mean,
we'll
get the heart of it here. We'll see what happens.
I was going to say, if you want a full episode on purity culture after this little tidbit, drop a note in our Discord in our Christianity channel.
Mm-hmm.
So Preston's kind of alluded to it with the Marianismo, but there is this idea of biblical womanhood that to do God's will, women need to submit to their husbands in every aspect of their life.
Yay!
This includes what to wear, what their schedule looks like, and being ready and willing to satisfy his sexual needs.
I mean, somebody's a winner here, and it's not the woman.
No. The Duggars allude to this in some episodes of, like, preparing for marriage, and this is also why she has 37 children.
That's too many.
I don't think it's actually 19.
That sounds more correct.
But there's a lot of women out there with a lot of kids because of this.
Was it 19 and counting? Was that the name of it?
I think by the end, it started at like 14 kids and counting.
Okay.
She had. Pew, 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 pew.
The good thing about that is that it gets easier with time.
Yeah, I think it's just like a slip and slide by the end.
Yeah.
I think the whole uterus comes out by the end, and you gotta take. Like,
there comes a time when the whole thing just collapses and says, "Please, no more."
Like a cow, you take like a broom handle and back in.
It's a terrible image.
I know, but I'm pretty sure that's where she's at now. Anyway,
thanks for that.
Whoa. So I figured this is a type of grooming. It starts at a young age with purity culture. There's purity balls and purity rings and purity vows. And Jesus, and this is very important, is that Jesus is your boyfriend. So boys don't have an equivalent.
Right.
Jesus is your boyfriend. And so there's no dating, only courtship. So
what?
No dating, only courtship, which is just like basically the young man is trying to impress your father on chaperone dates so that your father will sell you to this boy.
I mean, that's what it adds up to. Yeah, sure. Not cool.
So, I mean, obviously there's like you said, go turn on the Duggars on TLC. Lots of Christians still like purity culture, but now purity culture really became a thing in the 90s. And now we're starting to see all the negative effects of like people hating themselves.
And everyone around them.
And everyone around them. Whatever.
It's just not
I was going to say
healthy.
20 years later. It's more like 30 years later.
Time is terrible.
As a child of the 90s, I'm like, no. But there are lots and lots of articles on how bad purity culture is, which is where I think we could do a full episode, because I didn't even have the gum analogy, which now I'm going to have to explain the gum analogy.
I think we've talked about that before on the show.
Well, if we haven't, Preston, would you want a piece of gum that's been chewed by someone else?
I mean, in truth, that depends on who the person is.
Yeah, so you wouldn't want a woman who's had sex with another man.
Is that the same as chewed up gum?
It's exactly the same as chewed up gum. Ew, it's not.
Gross. It's a gross analogy. It's not okay. Especially if, you're into the Christian context that this comes from, where forgiveness is actually a far more important doctrine.
It's like these people don't know JC at all.
Yes. That's the reality.
So I don't. Anyway, purity culture is a set of beliefs that emphasize the importance of sexual purity. And again, this is really popular in fundamentalist evangelical communities. Premarital sex, bad.
Terrible sin. Like, the idea in these groups is that the only thing you could do worse than that is commit murder.
Yes.
And
like
some people are still willing to get really angry at people for having sex outside of marriage and then go commit murder.
Right. Yes. So basically, their verbiage that you'll hear is that, like, the greatest gift of all is giving your virginity to your husband, and like you're taking that away from him. Anyway.
It's not healthy.
Like Preston mentioned, men and women are definitely held to different standards here. Women are expected to be chaste and modest, and men become these protectors of virginity, and it's really weird and gross.
Men are still expected to be chaste and modest too.
Absolutely, but
it's not a double standard, but there's a little bit more forgiveness for them.
They can get away without anyone knowing.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, if they get caught, there is the public shame thing sometimes, depending on the group. But mostly the rules are still the same. It's just one gets forgiven a lot more easily.
And again, this is a lot of like where men are visual creatures and don't lead your brothers into sin and all that garbage.
Yeah. What did Jesus say on the subject?
JC said, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away.
Yeah. So don't go shouting at other people about how they're dressed. Just pull your eyeballs out.
I forget Matthew 5:28.
I am so terrible at citations. I don't remember
That's
exactly
what I try to
where it is.
remember.
Unless it's written down.
Oh, I'm super close, but
that is the context of the point.
I'm real close, but I don't actually see the quote.
Yeah, 528 was the whole in your heart business.
Anyway, that's a good one to remember, everyone.
Yeah, Jesus said, if you can't stop looking at a girl, pull out your eyeballs.
Love it.
Yeah.
Good job. Good guy, Jesus. Yeah, so like I said, we know that there's lots of negative mental health consequences, guilt and shame, and we know part of this is we know abstinence-only sex ed doesn't work. That plays into this a little bit.
Yeah, that's only failed everywhere it's been done.
Terribly. Yeah. It's bad. And there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of these pieces of like states that often have abstinence-only sex ed have really high pregnancy rates and no abortion laws. And
when you say no abortion laws, you do mean anti-abortion laws. Yeah.
Yeah. As in abortion is not protected by the law.
Yeah.
But you're right. I said that backwards.
It's a problem.
Yeah. Purity rings were very popular in the 2000s with the Jonas Brothers and Miley Cyrus and Selena Gomez, Demi Lovato, all wearing purity rings. Guess how many of them kept that pledge?
0.
0 is correct.
There are less famous people who have kept that pledge. Probably not lots and lots, but there are some.
I mean, there's something about being a celebrity and having attractive people throw themselves at you.
Yeah.
That the average human I couldn't pay someone to have sex with me until my husband came along. Oh boy, that was a personal overshare.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Also, purity balls. Super creepy. Super creepy. Have you ever watched a purity ball?
I've seen a video of one, and I am so glad that's not part of my experience growing up.
So, to paint a picture, though, there are some great YouTube videos, and maybe if we remember, we'll pop some into the Christianity Discord when this releases today. They're like kind of 10 to 12-year-old girls. They're very young.
So not really worried about sex at the moment.
No, probably not even fully understanding what sex is.
Probably.
Which makes
I mean, considering where these are happening, very likely.
So also creepy that, like, you know, these people talk about drag queens grooming children, and you're having a purity ball.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's the deal.
So they wear little white dresses, and they walk down an aisle with their fathers. And they make a vow to each other.
Because you wouldn't cheat on your dad, right?
You wouldn't cheat on your daddy. And so you promise to your daddy that you're not going to have sex before marriage. And then he promises to protect your chastity and dignity. And he gives you your purity ring. And if that's not the creepiest fucking thing you've ever heard.
Okay, so I can get on board with the whole father's side of what his pledge is of protecting her, with my preferred interpretation, protecting her from things she doesn't want to have happen.
I like that.
And I think that's okay. But beyond that, you get into some really sticky problems.
Yes. Also, I just like to note that these purity balls also typically have just the biggest fucking crucifix you've ever seen. And I just think that adds to the creepiness.
That's fair.
That's just me.
Yeah. What's really unfortunate is how very frequently these men who pledge to protect their daughters fail to protect their daughters from family. And sometimes themselves.
Oh, you mean like the daggers?
That's a good example.
Thank you.
It's weird how often they come up today, but we got what we got.
I mean, they're just the perfect example of all that is wrong with this.
Yeah. And kind of connected to this whole purity culture thing is what Sigmund Freud liked to call the Madonna-Whore complex.
Like a virgin, touched for the very first time.
Yeah, Madonna really played up this whole complex thing. That was her bit.
But you do meet the Madonna, Mother Mary, not the singer.
Well, now we're on both.
Now we're talking about both. I love this. See how my singing has brought us all together.
Yeah, and I feel like purity culture has actually really influenced how Madonna-Whore complex comes out and becomes visible in the world. It's been a thing for a while, and purity culture has too. It's just not the same as it was 200 years ago or whatever. But it was originally labeled the Madonna-Whore complex by Sigmund Freud. And though he's wrong about a lot of things, including his explanation for where this all comes from, it's still a reality that is seen all over the world today. The idea is that men see women as one of two feminine archetypes, pretty much the same ways we see women in the Bible, unfortunately, is that you have either the saintly mother or the dirty whore. Yeah.
Woman in the streets, but a freak in the sheets.
And such a thing is a problem for people who have this complex.
Yes.
People who see the world through this lens refuse to acknowledge that the people they admire are sexual beings, and they refuse to acknowledge that people who satisfy any sexual appetite are worthy of love. Instead, they think that they're unworthy of love. It's really a problem when you start just having this harsh dichotomy in the world.
Yes.
And most harsh dichotomies are a problem. Let's be real. Freud had all this idea that it's connected to how every man has an Oedipus complex and ridiculous things like that.
You don't want to have sex with your mom?
No.
Okay.
But there are still a lot of people who struggle with this way of looking at the world, that obviously if you are interested in sex, you're a whore and you're a terrible person, and I could never have you in my family to raise my kids. Or the alternative of, now you've married somebody that you've been chasing for a while, who's lived this whole purity life that you're told is supposed to be great, and once you have sex with her, you lose interest in her romantically because now she's a whore and has no value. It's terrible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another thing we didn't even talk about for purity culture, is that there's so much pressure on the wedding night that often it's really bad.
I mean, it's an unfortunate reality that most people have really bad sex their wedding night, whereas this could have been solved with better education, maybe a little bit of practice.
But then they also feel kind of like you said, but they feel shame on their wedding night, even though, because they've been told it's bad, 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 and signing a piece of paper all of a sudden can't change 20 plus years of
sex is terrible.
Sex is bad. You'll get pregnant and die.
Yeah.
Mean Girls.
Yeah. Of course, this complex is not limited to men. Women also have been known to see men in this same dichotomy. It seems to be a lot less common, but it's out there. It happens because men and women aren't coded that differently.
Gentlemen in the streets, but a freak in the sheets.
Thanks.
I don't even know what I'm saying.
So, contrary to Freud, modern suggestions connect this in the two ways women are described in Christian Bibles and also popular Southeastern European mythologies. It's more about the stories we keep telling are part of the problem. So, tell better stories, live better lives, and maybe the next generation just be a little bit less messed up.
That'd be nice.
Right?
So moving on to Islam, we unpacked a lot with Christianity.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, everybody in our Western Hemisphere has to be exposed to the pressure of the Christian norm. Making it the norm feels weird, but that's what we have. But you're also going to be exposed to Muslims if you live on this planet.
Yes.
At some point.
Yeah. I'm like the other Abrahamic traditions, Islam like sex to be confined to marriage only. Muslim women are only permitted to marry Muslim men, but Muslim men can marry a woman of any Abrahamic faith.
Yeah, this is a pretty good example of a weird double standard. The idea is that a child must follow the faith of the father. But this gets tricky because in Judaism, your mother has to be a Jew. So if a Muslim man marries a Jewish woman, you do have some conflict.
You've had a Christian.
That has happened. It's not like it doesn't cause problems.
Sounds quite problematic.
Islam does discourage celibacy, unlike some Christian traditions that we've talked about before. And much like in Judaism, Islamic tradition dictates that a person is ritually unclean after sex. This means that they're forbidden from touching the Quran or participating in the Salat, those mandatory prayers, until they have cleaned up.
Good.
Yeah. Clean up after sex. It's the healthy thing to do.
Don't touch things in your house when you're covered in milkshake.
Thanks for that.
Well, you're welcome.
Yay, Discord chats. For those of you listening carefully, this may be a clue to what day this was actually recorded. And the same also applies during menstruation. Just clean up, and then you can participate in Salat and actually touch the Quran to read it.
Of course, we know Islam is quite a modest religion, and people are quite familiar with the hijab, which is worn by some Muslim women. And so the only men allowed to see a Muslim woman's hair, she chooses to wear the hijab, are her husband and men that she can't be married to. So her brothers, her uncles on her mom's side, that's kind of it.
Yeah, and on some parts of the Jewish world also live by a very similar rule.
Right.
We got good old Moira Rose and her many wigs as a pretty visible example in popular culture.
Men, though, in Islam also have dress requirements that encourage modesty. There are parts of their body that they're not allowed to show. Public nudity is haram.
Yeah, that's fair. It's also forbidden for partners to share details of their intimacy with others. We talked about this in Marianismo. Could be problematic. But, you know.
Only if he's bad to you.
Right.
But if he's good to you, then that's something to share over a chai. No.
Sure. While it must be prefaced that there is diversity of thought on the subject, many imams are happy to tell global audiences that if a man has no beard, he is womanly and is inviting others to sin by committing sodomy. Not everybody agrees on this.
No.
That's a good thing, because a beard isn't what makes a man.
Nope. You can't grow a beard. What if you could just grow a sad, patchy thing?
Then you flaunt it. You let it be weird and patchy, and you keep that hair on. That's the rule that a lot of Muslim subcultures really enforce in really unfortunate ways. Anal sex is also strictly forbidden in Islam.
Even between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
No anal sex.
Yeah.
Not just...
Oral sex is also a huge no-no. Well, okay, there's some variety on that. That some schools of thought say it's okay as long as you don't swallow anything. But others are like, no, the whole deal is haram.
Can you make the noise for our audience that probably has never been in a real episode, but we sound check with it all the time?
Is that everything you wanted it to be?
I guess so. We'll see what kind of complaints we get this week.
Well, it happened.
How do you write that out? That'd be a good episode name.
I have no idea how you would spell that. But so far we've just stuck to the Abrahamic faiths. That's not a great global representation. So let's take just one step further to the east.
All right.
So the Dharmic religions also have something to say. Generally, a lot less sex positive, with some exceptions.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking we're going to have to do an episode maybe next Valentine's Day on religions that are more sex positive, because the big ones aren't.
I mean, the fun part of that is most of the most sex positive religious groups are danger cults.
That's true.
Not all, but definitely most.
Well, we'll find some. This time next year, guys, sex cults.
Perfect. So generally speaking, Buddhism is really not such a fan. Any sort of craving is the cause of suffering. That's what the Buddha said. Not in English, so it's not a perfect word for word what he said, but you get the idea. There aren't really strict laws that universally apply to all Buddhists, but monastic traditions do have strict laws against sex of any kind. No exceptions, not even for procreation. So I guess the idea is if you're really committed to getting off this rock and escaping the reality as we know it and becoming one with Brahma, that you just wouldn't be trying to repopulate the marble.
Fair.
Masturbation is also counted as serious sexual misconduct. There's only 4 things that generally will get you kicked out of most monasteries. There's probably some that have additional rules. These are the big 4 for the vast majority. There's also, having sex to start with, also murder, theft, and falsely claiming a superhuman ability.
Okay. But if you truthfully claim a superhuman ability, you're fine.
Yeah, if you can prove it, rock on.
All right.
But if you claim that you are so pious that you can float above the ground, you better show that off.
Okay.
If you can't prove it, you're out of the monastery.
All right.
Yeah. In one Japanese Buddhist tradition, sex isn't so bad. I thought it was actually kind of interesting to find that there is this particular exception to the norm. As long as you don't think about it all the time, because of course, craving is suffering, so you should avoid it. But sex isn't so bad. Many such Buddhists live long-term relationships with prostitutes and geishas, which I was surprised. Like, once you've got a relationship, you've got a bond, you've got an attachment. Attachment is the problem.
Yeah.
But we still have it. They're avoiding the attachment of marriage. They just
Can't
keep
commit.
going to the same prostitute. Whatever. If your religion doesn't say it's bad, what else is there to say that it's bad? Also, some groups make distinctions generally between the bad that is sex in general and a more specific, worse homosexual activity. Most don't make that distinction, but some do. I mean, just don't have sex at all. End the species. That's the goal.
Okay. In Hinduism, sex is broadly expected to be for procreation, but sex for pleasure is also generally expected, especially within marriage. Extramarital sex is taboo. Most people agree with that.
Well, I mean, extramarital includes premarital.
Oh.
Yeah, like
I thought you meant
any
like an
sex outside
adulteress.
marriage. Yeah. Adultery is definitely part of that and is worse than taboo. That's straight up, you're going to have a really bad time and it's not going to last very long.
While it is expected that a woman's hymen should break and bleed on the wedding night, that flood is seen as destructive. So a Brahmin is called to bless the sheets and the union after the fact to ensure a long and happy marriage.
What a weird thing to do.
We've done that all over the world for a very long time.
Yep.
I just feel so invasive.
Right? Yeah. Oh, well. In a way somewhat similar to the levirate marriage of Judaism, when a woman is united with her brother-in-law to raise children to belong to her dead husband, the common Hindu expectation is that the bride belongs to the family of her dead husband and will either remain unmarried or will be united with a near relative to raise children for her dead husband's family. Similar but different.
Yes, but I added this, even though it doesn't have too terribly much to do with sex, but the practice of sati. Have you heard of this?
I'm sure I have, but...
It is the practice of self-immolation.
Yeah.
For a widow. She would throw herself on her husband's funeral pyre to die with him.
Yeah. That doesn't make things better.
Yes and no, like really bad for the woman.
Yeah.
But the practice started to remove the woman from the inheritance. But then also with widespread poverty, nobody wanted to look after the widow and being a time when women just stayed at home and raised kids and looked after the house. She had no skills to make money. So it was just removing a burden. Air quotes, not a real burden. People have value from society.
Yeah.
So while there were lots of problems with the British colonization of India, they did actually put in laws to prohibit sati.
Not that it doesn't happen. It's just...
I think it's pretty uncommon now, but they also have 1 billion people. So I'm not saying we should bring it back.
Didn't India just surpass China as the most populous
I
nation?
think so.
Yeah. Not that one thing is connected to the other. It's just a novel thing.
But let's get into what everyone's really here for, Preston. The Kama Sutra.
Ooh, the sexiest book of all time.
Sexiest book in the world. So a sutra is a writing.
Yep.
And kama means desire or longing.
Sexy book.
Sexy book. Sorry, Preston. Contrary to popular belief, the Kama Sutra is not entirely about sex.
I mean, is sex only penile-vaginal interaction?
No. But it also includes details on how to find a partner, how to court that partner.
Throw a rock, you'll hit somebody, They'll make a noise. You found her.
Wow. Is that how you landed Amanda?
No.
Also, how to keep them happy, some of which is sexual. But it also includes chapters on the philosophy of love and self-care.
It's an all-encompassing book more people should read. You can also get it as a manga.
Oh.
Yeah. You probably shouldn't, but you could.
I want to now.
Okay. I actually spotted it in one of the used bookstores.
Oh, don't get it from a used bookstore. Buy it new.
Yeah.
Spend the extra $20.
If the pages are stuck together, that means they learned something.
No. Buy it new. Let's do this. So, So as I mentioned, kama means longing, desire, or wish, and it's one of the 4 goals of life in Hinduism. While it does typically refer to sexual desire, it can also broadly refer to any sort of passion, affection, or love. The first mention of the Kama Sutra dates back to 900, somewhere between 900 BC and 700 BCE. And it's a mixture of poetry and prose, and it incorporates Hindu mythology.
The stories that you need to get you there. It's not like it's... I'm not throwing shade. The Bible's got it too.
I know. And if you'll remember from our religious posers episode, the Kama Sutra uses asanas, so physical poses, just like yoga. So
if you're looking for a new idea, this book might just have it for you.
Yeah, so the Kama Sutra is like this. Yeah, it's also a physical side of yoga.
Mm-hmm. It's great.
Yeah. Maybe we should do it for our book club. No.
That doesn't seem like a good choice.
That doesn't sound like something we should share. But Preston, what if someone did want to get in our book club, not about the Kama Sutra?
Well, definitely our Patreon. That's the number one way. Also, if you want to maintain a discussion with us about what you want to read, Discord is a great way to connect so we can talk about that rather than just signing up to our Patreon. Valuable, helpful, helps us pay for all of this, but we want to hear from you.
Also on our Patreon, we have bonus episodes and early release for everything. And if the subscription model isn't for you, we have some sick merch on Spreadshirt.
So much fun. Great things.
And we'd like to thank our patron, Lisa, for supporting the show.
Thank you, Lisa. Peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian Protestant had fulfilled its